Hello, welcome to Cornbread and Roses, y'all. I'm Austin, your friendly neighborhood organizer, and I'm here with Jason tonight.
Hello, comrades.
And we might have another person join us a little later, but we're gonna get going here. And this week, we're talking about Alabama's abyssal. Like that's my $10 word or of the day. Abyssal parole system and the history of convict leasing. And but first, I think we're going to start with some DSA news. Uh, yeah, DSA is organizing a march ahead of the inauguration. You can look that up if you look at DSA and inauguration out there, and if you want to, join and do a march in your city, contact us. We'll help you get that going. But also, there was the Starbucks strike, which I actually got to attend. There was about half the workers were there. They shut it down on Christmas Eve. I brought my little girl with me and, tried to get her to do some chants, but she's way too cool for that. But and we had a few folks from DSA out there, and we had some people drive by and stop and talk to us and showed their solidarity. And a lot of truckers were honking their horns, and it was fantastic. I got to meet YDSA organizer at Jacksonville State University, and yeah.
And this was in Scottsboro, right?
Yes, Scottsboro, Alabama. If y'all ever heard of the Scottsboro Boys, it's the same place.
So yeah, Scottsboro is the second Starbucks location in Alabama to form a union, and they're the first ever to have gone on strike. So very proud of what they're doing out there with the Starbucks United Workers, or the Starbucks Workers United Union.
Yeah, I think that's the third time I've been out there, and it always warms my heart. Tried to encourage somebody at one of the stores in that little strip mall area to start their union, and told them if they needed some help, let us know. But I don't know how motivated they were at that moment.
And also in North Alabama, the Teamsters went on strike at a Amazon facility in here in North Alabama. Isn't that right?
Yeah, extended the strike across the nation. I'm sure y'all probably seen the driver up in New York City. He was driving and decided to stop driving, and the cops promptly arrested him. There was a same day Luigi Mangione was getting perp walked with all the artillery pieces they had around him. But yeah, they've extended the picket line to several locations in Alabama. I don't have them listed here in front of me, but I think there was about 6. I could be mixing that up though, but there's at least a couple that extended out to Alabama. I'm not really sure how many distribution centers there are. There's one up here and there's one in Birmingham. But yeah, the strike is our superpower.
Yeah, here's a fun fact. How much do you think that Starbucks CEO Brian Nickel makes every year, or makes an hour? How much does he make an hour?
An hour?
Yeah. According to the NAALC.
Let me go with $10,000 an hour.
Higher.
Oh my God. $25,000 an hour?
Higher.
You got to be kidding me.
$57,000 an hour.
$57,000 an hour. Oh my God.
For one guy.
How many workers that, that's close to a living wage in most states.
That is a pretty, not a great, but a decent salary in Alabama for one worker an hour. That's 8 workers a day he could pay for a year. And he makes that an hour. And they're fussing about wages. Yeah. And they're fussing about raising wages for workers.
Good Lord. That's what we're dealing with, folks. The new Gilded Age. Welcome to it.
Yeah, it's outrageous. So, also, North Alabama DSA had its general meeting recently, and we made some resolutions regarding strike funds. And we appointed yours truly to be the new grievance officer, which I have no idea what I'm doing or how to do that. So I'll be figuring that out over the course of the next year.
Hey, that's par for the course, dog. Par for the course. Just stick your nose in there and you'll figure it out. And that goes to all y'all out there too. You don't know what you're doing? Nobody does. Just show up.
Yeah. What if someone has a grievance with me though? What if you have a grievance with the grievance officer?
Now we're getting meta.
Yeah.
Now we're like oh goodness. And we already got a grievance in the chat. That's unfortunate, but duly noted. But yeah.
Hey, why don't you be in the channel or in the chat? Why is he not on the show?
Right? You're supposed to be in here with us figuring this out, man. But he's tied up at the moment. Hopefully we'll see him in about 10, 20 minutes. But yeah, congratulations though, Jason, because just so people understand, like the structure of like a DSA chapter is typically there's a steering committee, which is a handful of officers, like a couple of co-chairs, treasurer, secretary, which is what position I'm filling right now, and membership coordinator. And they operate just to make things that you almost want to be, transparent, of course, but also like more like an admin function and just like facilitate the work of the group. And you want to be, almost, like not even really there, if that makes sense. But the grievance officer is outside of the steering committee and liaises up with the national grievance committee or grievance officers to, if there's an issue inside the chapter and there's a breakdown in your community agreement, a breakdown in like civil discourse, if there's any of the isms show up and somebody's got some issues with that and internal bias and stuff like that, that's where the grievance officer steps in and takes the grievance and then starts managing the situation. But they stand apart and really above, in my opinion, the steering committee and also the committees and working groups. So that's kind of how the grievance officer works. All right.
I don't mean to sound glib about what the grievance officer does. I think it's an incredibly vital role which I plan on taking seriously and exercising to the best of my ability. There have been some very sad cases among other leftist organizations where they dropped the ball on serious accusations and other things like that. And I am committed to making sure that does not happen in North Alabama. So,
you're following, and one of our former members had to step away. Big shoes to fill. She did a great job, Katie. We appreciate your time that you took and all the meetings you went to, and taking the initiative to step up and do that. And we appreciate you, dude. We appreciate you for taking the initiative yourself. And I look forward to hearing no grievances ever, but such is life.
Exactly.
And if anything pops up, I know you'll be able to manage it and handle it professionally.
I'll do my best.
But, we got some news from Mars. He should be showing up here in about 20 minutes. I guessed correctly. So yeah, and shout out to Extra Bulla. They got a show of their own. They stream, I think, it 3 days a week in the morning, and then usually a couple times during the week at night. And they do a real good job of like busting through the propaganda out there. So if you ever want to catch another show, check out Extra Bulla. We appreciate you, dog. Thank you.
Well, it takes me all week to prepare for one show.
I know. And he's got jokes. Like,
Wow.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm barely got my head above the water with this thing. But yeah, so here we are in Alabama. As we heard last week, possibly the worst in the States, maybe worst in the world, as far as the conditions and situation and everything. And this all started, and this damn shame of it is like, this is an improved system compared to how it used to be, and where it all started out at. I'm sure y'all out there have seen that sheriff star that has engraved upon it Slave Patrol, which is, where the American prison system backbone was created. And, it started with convict leasing back in the day.
So yeah, so we're going to go through a lot of bad news, and then at the end we'll have just a little bit of good news, just to show you that good things are possible in Alabama, that it's possible to make things better a little bit, so that you don't completely lose hope in doing anything political in this state. But yeah, so as you may know, the 13th Amendment of the Constitution has a loophole. So it bans slavery and involuntary servitude, but it says except for those convicted of crimes. And
what a loophole that is, too. You could drive a Mack truck through that thing.
So yeah, so in 2022, actually, though, Alabama became one of, I think, 8 states that removed the punishment clause. So in Alabama, right, like, so strangely enough, in Alabama, it's no longer permissible to use prisoners for unpaid labor. But in between the end of chattel slavery and 2022, there was a period of time where convict leasing was quite common. And so the game was, so young, mostly black men were arrested for petty crimes. So gambling, vagrancy, other just trumped up whatever they could trump up in order to get them into prison, and then hired out the private companies. So they worked in coal mines, they worked in sawmills, they worked for U.S. Steel, which was the biggest company in the world at the time. They built railroads. They did all sorts of dangerous work, and thousands of them died. In between, or thousands of people died while convict leasing was a thing. So Alabama was the last state, of course, to officially ban convict leasing in 1928. So not even 100 years ago. But prior to its banning, no other state in America had earned as much money from convict leasing. At one point, it was more than 70% of all annual revenue in the state was from convict leasing.
Man. I think it's somewhere like a $500 million now. And I read an article a while ago. Arizona came out and said that if they didn't have their little convict leasing program, that the state's whole economy would fall apart. I think they were in the neighborhood of something like $3 billion in labor.
Yeah, so it was an obscene amount of money that was being made, and it's a lot of money that's being made now off of prisoners. So they're trying to and it's always been this story, right, where we abolished slavery, but they were able to sort of continue it under a different legal structure, and then we abolished that, and now they've started to recreate it as best they could under the current conditions. So they're always trying to carry out the old game under slightly different circumstances.
Yeah,
That's an overview of convict leasing. You can read more online. There's a really good book called Slavery by Another Name, which talks about Alabama's past when it comes to convict leasing. So by the time you get to the 1970s, you had such an extremely bad situation in Alabama prisons that it was actually taken over by Alabama's prison system was actually taken over by a federal judge, which the Justice Department keeps threatening to do today. And in fact, if Donald Trump had not won election in 2016 and made Jeff Sessions Attorney General, it was quite likely that Alabama's prison system was going to be taken over by the DOJ. So
that's how that worked out, huh? So Sessions saved the administrators, I guess I'll call them, of the prison system skin by getting himself the AG job, huh?
Right. And the new system is basically, so what they do is they classify inmates by their behavior behind bars. So, it doesn't matter what your criminal history is. If you have behaved reasonably well while you were incarcerated, you would be eligible to work an outside job.
Well, that's almost that's a not benefit. That's not the word I'm looking for, but a privilege, right? That's how they frame some of that.
I'm sure they frame it as a privilege because they're letting people work for minimum wage and then taking 40% off the top. That's the other nice thing, is that if you're a prisoner on one of these work and you are working for the state of Alabama, they take 40% of you have to make at least minimum wage, but they take 40% off the top.
Well, they still tax you though too. Am I right?
I'm sure that they still take income taxes. I don't know for sure, but I'm sure that they do.
That would be another 30%. So now we're looking at 70% gone.
And they nickel and dime you on other things. So you have to pay for transportation. You have to pay for your laundry. So there's all kinds of fees that you're subject to. And then on top of that, where a prisoner is going to spend their money. They're going to spend it on prison goods in the commissary, right? And the goods in the commissary have vastly marked up prices.
I mean, really, it's 100% taxed if you look at it through all the money that they do. It's like a company town or whatever.
Right.
Whatever money you end up with gets put back into the prison's commissary or phone system or internet or what have you.
And even though Alabama was one of the few states that removed the punishment clause from the 13th Amendment at the state level, Kay Ivey signed an executive order in 2023, I think, giving the Corrections Department the ability to take away the good time credits. So this is time taken off of your sentence if you have behaved well. So they can take away those good time credits for refusing to work. So no matter, even if you're a model prisoner, if you refuse to take one of these jobs, you're no longer earning time off. So it can be difficult for you to qualify for early release.
Well, I just got a feeling about this that if you're sick, that they'll charge that as refusing to work. Well, I'm not sure if that's true, but I got a feeling it is.
So prisoners say that they're taking home, they're pocketing $100, $200 after a 40-hour work week, after they get all the pre-tax deductions. So the phrase pre-tax deductions implies that they are taking taxes out as well, which, I mean, of course they are. And yeah, so there are thousands of prisoners participating in working for companies you've heard of, including Burger King, Trader Joe's. There's a list here somewhere.
I got you. Let's see here. We got some of them right here.
Yeah, and so this is from AP News. In Alabama, the roster of companies hiring inmates is vast. In the past 5 years, over 500 prisoners have worked at local Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King, and Applebee's restaurants alone. They've cleaned hotels, manufactured kitchen cabinets, made yarn used in carpets, constructed doors for houses sold at national home stores like Lowe's, and built trailers pulled behind semi trucks. The article has a picture of Trader Joe's, but I don't know what Trader Joe's has to do with anything. That may not be anything to do with Alabama.
We got a Trader Joe's just down the road. You're telling folks that could be a few folks, incarcerated folks, working down there.
Well, the article says that Trader Joe's and McDonald's and some other companies mentioned were trying to cut ties with correctional departments and third-party suppliers that used prison labor, or that they were in the process of doing so. So I guess they are trying to eliminate prison. So McDonald's technically has a rule in their, I don't know, corporate laws or whatever that is, that says that they can't use prison labor in their supply chains, but they have been. So
look here. More than 10,000 inmates have logged a combined 17 million work hours outside Alabama's prison walls since 2018. That's the last 6 years.
And Alabama's getting 40% of whatever they're making, in addition to taxes and in addition to nickel and diming them on other things.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, here's what I'm talking about. They have to make the minimum wage, but the state gets 40%, and also nickels and dimes them on other stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, and they're not allowed to organize. They're not allowed to go on. They're not technically allowed to go on strike, although there has been historically a movement called the Free Alabama Movement, which has tried to organize work stoppages in the past 10 years in Alabama and refused to work. The organizers were put in solitary confinement for doing so. There was a crackdown. I went to protests where they were taking our photographs. So I'm sure that they've got a nice picture of me holding up a sign outside of Donaldson somewhere or at Moore.
Yeah, they just recently did some protests at St. Clair this past summer. And if you look up here, we got their contact information, their phone number, their email address. So and understand this movement's been around since at least 2014. So they're around 10 years now. And it's incarcerated folks are the ones that are the primary organizers, which is pretty unique, in my opinion. It's not unheard of, clearly, but it's the only group in Alabama that is led by the folks that are imprisoned.
So, and it's important to note that according to the current rules now, so it's based on their behavior inside during incarceration, and not necessarily what they were convicted for. So they could have violent crimes on their rap sheet, and they're trusted to go and work these jobs and be around the general public, and with very minimal oversight, because Alabama's prisons are chronically understaffed. So, and
I think I don't like that phrasing when they say that, because it's not really they're understaffed; it's they're overpopulated. Really, you know what I mean?
Sure. Alabama's prisons were built to hold 12,000 people. They currently hold more than 20,000 people. So, and I mentioned they're trusted to go and work these jobs, not because, oh my God, they're scary people making your burger at Burger King. That's not my point. My point is, and to segue to our next topic, which is that they're not being granted parole. So there was a series of very good articles in AL.com earlier this year about Alabama's broken parole system by Ivana Hrenque. Did we say her name was pronounced that?
I think we did it right.
Good. It's a very hard name. It's Hrynkiw.
Like I couldn't spell that or rhythm. So yeah.
Right.
But Miss Hrenque has been hard at work on this.
So so basically, even though they're considered safe enough to go work at Burger King or for Applebee's or wherever, at some point in the last decade, and I can't remember the exact year this happened. So I want to say it was either 2018 or 2019. There was a prisoner who was granted parole in Alabama who went on a crime spree and allegedly killed 3 people. And after that, there was a lot of pushback from the lock 'em up crowd, including Governor Cave Ivey and Attorney General Steve Marshall, who wants to be governor and is going to run for governor, and no doubt wants to burnish his tough on crime credentials in order to make him more appealing to people in the state. But anyway, so there is a 3-person panel that determines whether or not someone is granted parole. And those 3 people are appointed by the governor. They operated a little bit more independently prior to this one inmate going on this crime spree. But afterwards, they were... The governor basically took over a lot more of has a lot more control over what they can say and do. So the then current head, or the then head of the parole board, was a woman named Lynn Head, who resigned in protest because she felt like the governor had encroached on the job too much. and Kay Ivey replaced her with a woman named Lee Gwatney, who is a former prosecutor and is a consistent no vote. Like, she votes no matter what. Like, she has had quadriplegics before her. She did not vote. A dead man did not vote voted not to parole the dead man. She is a reliable no vote. And until recently, the other two board members were mostly going along with that. And so from 2019 until the present, until last year, the number of paroles dropped to about 8%. So you had hundreds of people who were coming for the parole board. Now, prisoners aren't allowed to come to their own parole hearing. So you've got about 2 minutes to talk. So there are people who are there, like family members and other advocates who advocate for the release. And then there is Steve Marshall, the Attorney General, sends a representative to oppose all paroles, just to speak against paroles. And there are victims' rights organizations like Vocal, the Victims of Crime and Leniency, who always have people there speaking out against people who have been convicted of violent crimes.
Yeah, I think that Miss Watney lady, I think she paroled or voted 6 out of 250 cases this past year. And, the rate at which folks, if the statistics aligned, about 80% of people like meet the requirements for parole that we've been seeing.
Right. And this is a recent change. 5 years ago, in 2019, like more than half of the people who went before the parole board were granted parole. But when this Guathy woman took over, she ground the parole rate to a halt, and it started plummeting until it reached a low of 8% last year.
Yeah, I mean, just like thinking about it, she saw 250 cases, because that's when they, like, I think they meet about 3 days a week, and each person, they're not allowed to speak in their own defense, for one, and
they're not allowed to be there. They're not allowed to be at the parole hearing.
Yeah, if somebody wants to speak for them, they got about 2 minutes, and then there's usually always at least the corrections department shows up to talk about them, and what was the name of that? Vocal
Victims of Crime and Leniency,
and they usually show up to speak against them. So the deck is stacked.
Anybody who's convicted of a violent crime, Vocal will oppose them automatically, even over the objections of the family members who have been victimized by a particular person. But for lesser offenses like drug crimes and thefts and things like that, they usually defer to the family's wishes. However, Steve Marshall has a representative there who argues against parole, just period. And then they can set a time period of up to 5 years to before you can be heard again.
Yeah, that's crazy. You don't even get looked at once a year. You get looked at every 5 years for parole.
So and your case is barely considered. Like I said, your advocates have 2 minutes to speak. The opponents have 2 minutes to speak. They make decisions. Very rapidly. Like, it's basically just. And Guatney doesn't even think about it. She just votes no.
Morgan saying it's just draconian.
Right.
And, yeah. What's the due process? Certainly don't seem equal. I mean, if you can't even show up to talk about and present your case to folks, Because, right there, I would imagine that the person incarcerated being able to speak for themselves to the board would make an impact, seeing that person face to face, but it's almost like cowardice of them to not even, and I know they're going to say, oh, it costs too much money to do all that and yada, yada, yada. But
it's the politically safe decision. Like, no one can ever come back and criticize you if you don't let them go. It's theoretically right, because if they get released and there's another crime spree like there was in the case of and I wish I remembered his name.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
But in the state, they're betting that there's no political downside to just denying paroles, which I'm happy to say has not been the case. So even Republicans in the state legislature have been grilling, especially Guathny, over her record, like, because there are guidelines for who is supposed to be issued parole and who isn't, and the parole board currently isn't following their own guidelines to release people. Like I said, 5 years ago, you had greater than a 50-50 shot. And now in 2023, it was 8%. So, and of course, it goes that, I mean, this almost goes without saying, if you're a white male, you're 25% more likely to be paroled, even though the majority of people who come before the parole board are black.
Yep.
And women of all races tend to do better, although of course white women do better than black women.
Yeah, I think it's 33% white ladies and 32% of black ladies get paroled. So, I mean, that's within a statistical, closeness that, still not great, but still way better than what you see with black males and white males. The difference between them is, which goes back to, all the racism and bias that black dudes are more naturally aggressive and all this other horse shit you hear.
Yeah, I don't even want to give that kind of stuff oxygen.
Yeah. It's horse shit is what it is.
Right.
But real quick, I think we'll get a couple things answered when I'm gonna play a little bit of this video here. Miss, help me out with her name again.
It is Ivana Hrinkyu.
Thank you. I'm just gonna call her Ivana. Ivana, take it away.
Thomas Owens is a quadriplegic who can barely talk. He spends most of his days bedridden in a catatonic state. Yet one member of the Alabama Board of Pardons and Paroles recently voted the 34-year-old should remain in prison. And last year, the board denied parole to a man who had died 10 days before his hearing. These aren't anomalies either. In 2022, Alabama had one of the lowest parole rates in the nation at just 10%. Some of the people getting denied had charges for things like marijuana, decades-old burglary convictions, and plenty of them never hurt anyone. Meanwhile, our prisons remain overcrowded, understaffed, and under federal investigation with a looming trial for unconstitutional conditions. And yet, we let fewer and fewer people out of prison every year. As 4 non-blondes once asked, what's going on? Meet the 3-member parole board. Board chair Lee Guathny, a former prosecutor.
I voted to deny parole.
Former state trooper Daryl Littleton.
Is this a different life than what you were doing when you were a young kid?
And former Bureau of Pardons and Paroles worker Gabrielle Simmons. Each is appointed by the governor for a 6-year term. And if you're a prisoner in Alabama, these 3 hold the key to your freedom. Although you're unlikely to get it. Parole hearings happen 3 days a week and they're open to the public. But there's no dramatic Hollywood moment. Actually, inmates in Alabama can't even come to their own parole hearings. Instead, those who support or oppose parole go, and they're allotted 2 minutes to speak to the board. Representatives from the Alabama Attorney General's office and a victims group called VOCAL are there too. They usually speak in opposition to parole, even when a victim's family in a case supports release. In a matter of minutes, the board decides who gets a second chance. White men fare better than black men, and women do better overall, but no group does very well. If you're denied, you could have to wait up to 5 years to try again, if you're even allowed to try again before your sentence ends. But it hasn't always been like this. From 2015 to 2018, the parole rate was increasing, but then in 2019, the rate began to plummet. By the end of 2023, the board had paroled just 8% of inmates who had had a hearing. A few things happened about the same time the board decided to barely let anybody out. In 2017, a man named Jimmy O'Neill Spencer was paroled. Less than a year later, he killed 3 people. After his release on parole, he left a homeless shelter where he had been staying and went on a crime spree, ending with the murders of 2 women and a child. The board came under fire for their handling of the case, particularly from Alabama Governor Kay Ivey and Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall.
I personally knew these victims. There's no reason they shouldn't be alive today.
After that, in 2019, state lawmakers made some changes to the board and how it worked. They also allowed the governor more power in filling seats on the board. Groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center and state Democrats say that the legislation gave the governor too much power over the board's operations. After the former board chair resigned, Governor Ivey appointed a new chair, Lee Wathney, in 2019. That's when parole rates dropped to historic lows. Before getting to the parole board, Wathney worked as an assistant Alabama Attorney General. Since she got to the board, parole rates dropped another 21 percentage points by 2022. And they kept falling. In 2023, 81% of people up for parole met the board's guidelines. They only follow those guidelines 12% of the time. During parole hearings over the summer, Wathney denied parole more than any other board member. She only voted for parole in 6 of the roughly 250 cases that came before her. Wathney voted no in every case that her former employer, the AG's office, opposed. And 86% of people up for parole over the summer who were already on work release were denied parole. People in the prison system deemed safe to work in our communities every day. Wathney's term ends in 2025. There are no.
All right.
So yeah, there are no term limits. So that covered a lot of the same information, only like she's professional and good at presenting. We're just kind of muddling through, but it covered a lot of the same information. And that was the prisoner that I was talking about, who went on the crime spree that made it politically difficult in Alabama to start granting paroles, and these things happened. So yeah, Wathney is up for reappointment in 2026, and that
no term limits. And by the way, welcome, Mars.
Yeah, well,
Hey. I missed quite a bit of what you were talking about, but
it's all good.
I heard you were saying that they ended convict leasing in Alabama in the 30s.
1928.
Okay.
We got a little feedback on your speaker.
Oh, okay. Is that better?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. I say that like convict leasing is a little bit different, but ultimately it's not that much different from what's going on right now. And those things are still continuing all the way from, back then. And I actually worked with people who were on work release. That's what it's called now.
Right.
And yeah, they would make like $50 and they would work a lot of overtime. It's awful, like what goes on in the system.
So yeah, it's basically it's amazing how little progress has been made, because we went from chattel slavery to a system of forced work through incarceration. So
Right.
we went through one form of slavery basically to another form of slavery, which didn't get abolished until 1928. And then we immediately started doing this system where, okay, well, they're technically getting paid, but we're taking quite a big chunk out of it. They can't really refuse without incurring penalties. And some of them are working in dangerous jobs under dangerous conditions.
Yeah, it was definitely a dangerous job. And they didn't care like what happened to them at all. And people knew that they were incarcerated, so they knew that they could take advantage of them. I know our production manager was having an affair with one of the prisoners. And yeah, they understand that they can take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's like double like that's a position of hiring and firing and whatever, and also that person's in a that's
Vulnerable position. Yeah.
whew.
And a lot of these prison farms are actually based on old plantations or old plantation land.
Wow.
So basically, the owners of that land pre-Civil War, they owned the land, they had slaves. And then after the slavers lost, they started up just a new form of slavery and got all their workers back. I can't call them workers. They worked, but that was, you know what I mean? Like,
In a way, yeah. Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah,
But,
70% of the state's income was coming from convict leasing, where they were just selling the workers or selling the inmates to the highest bidder.
Well, look at our system now is they try to pin people down on simple drug charges and extend their sentence. So
Right.
they're still attempting to make more and more prisoners every single day.
well, yeah. Last week, our guest pointed out, Tahira pointed out that in Huntsville alone, over 50% of the folks incarcerated there are either unhoused and they end up in there, or it's a traffic violation and they end up in there.
Yes.
Able
to get bail.
Well, so the silver lining, though, is that as a result of Ivana Hrinku's reporting and popular backlash to it, the other two. So even though Guathny is still a reliable no vote, the other two members of the board, Littleton and I forget her name. Oh, I should be better about that. Have started voting over her in order to grant more paroles. So in 2024, the parole rate doubled. So it went from 8% to about 20%. So, and that happened in a solidly red Republican state where people saw an issue, and you had Republican state legislators grilling Guathny in hearings and turning up to parole board hearings to see for themselves what was happening. So it's possible to fight and win things in this state, even though it's top down controlled by Republicans. Like 20% is still abysmally low, and we should go back to the pre-2019 version where you had better than a 50-50 shot, and probably even more so.
Or maybe stop locking folks up.
Or maybe stop
Yeah.
locking folks up. So I'm not, but I still take this as good news. Like it's still horrible that Alabama prisoners are made to work, that they have or they're pressured to work, strongly pressured to work, basically made to work, that they face these deductions from their paycheck, that many of them are being forced to work in dangerous conditions where they have no rights to organize, no rights to strike, no rights to be protected at all. Like it's still, and then even though they're trusted to do work release, they're not trusted to be able to be let out on parole. Like it's still a horrible system, but I do take some hope from the fact that we were able to that pressure worked and we were able to double the rate.
Hey, bullying works. It does, folks. You get out there and you apply pressure through whatever means that you got at your disposal. It does make a difference. And, not that I'm a big fan of either political party out there, but I would like to highlight that of the elected officials, I think of Mr. Chris England, has been one of the Democrats that have tried to improve the system from within and try to get some better things achieved for folks that are incarcerated. So if you want to talk to somebody who might be listening a little bit, you can probably get in contact with Mr. England about what legislation can happen and what changes can be made for folks.
He proposed, so last year, during the last legislative session, he proposed 3 bills that were directly related to this issue. So number one, he introduced a bill that would allow inmates to attend their own hearings. So so I guess 4 bills, not 3. I'm sorry. So he wanted to expand the parole board from 3 to 5 so that it would be harder for one person to dominate the situation. He tried to create a council to set up to this, and this is me directly reading from the AP or from AL.com. His third bill sought to create a council to develop a new risk assessment for those up for parole and develop a process for inmates to appeal if they met the state guidelines but were denied anyway. He's already pre-filed that bill for the 2025 legislative session, which starts in February. So that bill is coming up. And his last bill called for inmates who were older than 60 who get denied parole to be given a detailed plan about how to improve their chances. And like it had other things for people looking for medical releases. So it's probably not worth contacting Chris England if you are not Chris England's constituent, because in general they won't care if you're not their constituent. But it is worth.
Hey, I will point out my taxes pay for every congressman, senator in the state and in the country. So y'all remember that too.
So you can do whatever you like. But I'm just saying, like in general, like I would stay away from contacting a legislator who wasn't my legislator. But you are an adult and you can make your own decisions. And I have my own hands full contacting my guy anyway, because I'm sure he's one of these lock them up people. But it's worth contacting your state legislator or even Governor Ivey and saying, I'm paying attention to this parole issue, and I want, I don't want you to reappoint Guathny. I want you to consider Chris England's bills about this topic. I want you to do something to reform Alabama's parole system. So just from the pressure that came out from these articles from advocates and other nonprofit groups was enough to make some small modicum of change happen in Alabama, and we can carry that momentum forward. It's low-hanging fruit.
So something with that is remember, folks, that all these bills start in the committee. So getting in touch with, and I'm trying to look up what committee it'd be, but all these bills start with a committee, and I'm guessing the committee, shit. Y'all come back to me.
So yeah, if you're not in the habit of routinely contacting your state legislator and even the governor about some issues, it might be worth trying to organize letter writing campaigns. There's one I'm aware of in Huntsville where there's a letter writing campaign that meets semi-regularly to gather and write letters to various elected officials about various topics. And it's, even if you're not familiar with the particular bill, like just expressing your general dislike of the current situation and asking them to do something about it will cause them to be will look on these bills more favorably.
So yeah, and it's actually what we got here is HB 40 has been introduced for this legislative session by Mr. England. And it's under the judiciary. So, folks on the Judiciary Committee, you want to contact them as well. On
So,
top
yeah.
of on top of your representatives, senator, and House representative. But yeah, this bill would create the Criminal Justice Policy Development Council to oversee the development and implementation of validated risk and needs assessments for offenders, parole release guidelines, and classification guidelines of inmates. Under the existing law, the Board of Pardons and Paroles uses parole release guidelines as an aid in the parole process. This bill would require the Board of Pardons and Paroles to use parole release guidelines created by the Criminal Justice Policy Development Council in its parole decisions. This bill would provide that if the board deviates from the parole release guidelines, the board would be required to state its reasons for the deviation. This bill would also provide appellate, that means appellate. I still am trying to figure out how to pronounce that word. Appeals relief for inmates who are negatively affected by the board's deviation from the parole release guidelines.
I think that's powerful. That's being able to appeal, making them state a reason. They can't just say no; they have to say why. So it's worth contacting your state legislator and asking them to support this bill, and just expressing your general dislike of the current parole situation. So we can strike while the iron is hot. This is potentially low hanging fruit. This is potentially an easy win for us, is to get that parole number up a little bit higher. If we can double it in 1 year, we can increase it even more this time around, and get hundreds of people who would normally be kept in prison out of prison.
Yeah, and looking at those numbers from last year, 600. It looks they see about 700 cases a year between men and women. There was something like 40 or so black females, 250 or so white males, 350 or so black males, and about 60 or 70 white females.
I think also working on the conditions of parole would be good as well. Because oftentimes parole is designed in a way to reincarcerate people.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw an article by Miss Ivana that a man ended up with a life sentence after missing a meeting with his probation officer. So, yeah. I don't know about you. How many meetings have y'all missed in y'all's life?
I was late. Just late.
Yeah.
And I want to call special attention to the role that Sue Bell Cobb has played in working to get parole for inmates. So she is a Democrat. She is the former Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. She was the first woman to hold that office in Alabama's history. She also ran for governor in 2018 and lost in the primary. So, and then the person she lost to wound up losing to Governor Ivey. But so there's this. She is so Cobb is the executive director and founder of a nonprofit called Redemption Earned, and she has been really doing some good work in trying to win parole for especially elderly and sick inmates. So I want to especially call out the work that she's done.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Once again, it highlights that more lawyers out there need to step up and do what's morally and ethically correct, and that everybody deserves good representation. So I'll give a shout out to her. Maybe you think we'll see her on the this coming ballot after Meemaw heads on out to pasture?
I have no sense for who's going to run for governor on the Democratic side. So I know that Steve Marshall wants it. I know that Will Ainsworth wants it, and he's already considered a prohibitive favorite. I know that the Rick Pate, who we talked about, wants the Commissioner of Agriculture and Industries. He wants to run for governor. He's been putting his name out there in a big way. So I think we'll at least see those people run for governor on the Republican side. But I have absolutely no sense for who's going to throw their hat in the ring on the Democratic side. It's possible that she could still want to be governor and still run.
I think the next governor will probably be a Republican, unfortunately. But I do think that we can get people in different positions. They wouldn't be Republican, obviously.
Yeah, my money's on Ainsworth. Ainsworth is the one to beat right now.
Yeah, I think him and Marshall both have a good chance of being governor.
And like you see Marshall, his name has been in the news a lot, where he's trying to burnish his tough on crime stuff while bragging about how proud he is of Alabama's a record number of executions, and saying that there are no good people left to reform in Alabama's prison system, and the people who were locked up deserve to be locked up. So,
yeah, just like Jesus would have wanted.
Yeah, exactly.
Mars, you said you work side by side with folks on that program. You still work with folks on that?
No, but I worked with them for about a year or two.
Okay.
And, it was definitely eye-opening working with them. You had people I was working with, they were in for manslaughter. They were in for not paying child support, traffic violations, all kinds of things.
Traffic violations.
Yeah.
Give me a break.
Yeah, the one lady, she ran over two people, like manslaughter. And then there's a guy in there for child support. And I kind of felt bad for the guy because he was working on paying his child support. And then he got on the work release thinking he was going to make some money to be able to work that off. And no, he barely made enough to like afford cigarettes, basically.
Well, yeah, according to the AL.com article that I can't find now, there were reports of people working 40 hours and bringing home $100 to $200 for a 40 hour, having that's all they had to show for a 40-hour work day.
And I want to say that they said they made around $50-$60. And they did overtime.
A week?
Wow.
Yeah, a week.
Yeah.
And I would buy them stuff just because, like, I don't know.
Because you have a heart, and yeah, I know they appreciate that, and
there's a lot of management and stuff that knew about all this, and like I said, they took advantage of the situation. Like I said, one of my managers was having an affair with one of the girls, and it's not like she can really speak out about it,
Right. That's absolutely taking advantage of somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, before we go, let me see here if I popped up plenty of little. Here we go. So before we go, I'm going to play one more little video real quick. Because we're not trying to end on a sad note. So, Limestone Correctional Facility warden and his wife arrested on multiple drug charges.
Start tonight with breaking news after the Limestone Correctional Facility warden and his wife are arrested on drug charges. The story has been developing since our news at 4 today. WAFO 48 Savannah Sapp live now outside the Limestone Correctional Facility where the warden worked. Savannah?
Well, Liz, Chadwick Crabtree is on mandatory leave without pay. Now, Crabtree is listed on the website as one of the 3 wardens from this facility facing charges. This is the mugshot of Crabtree and his wife, Melissa. Investigators say they searched Crabtree's home and the warden's office at the Limestone Correctional Facility. The report says both are charged with unlawful possession of marijuana and possession of a controlled substance. Now, we have reached out to the Alabama Department of Corrections for an interview and for more information on this matter, but we have not heard back at this time. State Representative Andy Witt says this arrest, quote, shows no one is above the law, and if the charges are true, Crabtree should be prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. For now, reporting live in Limestone County, Savannah Sapp, 48 News, on your side.
Thank you.
Yeah, that happened in April of this past year.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's a pretty well-known secret that the sheriff of Limestone County is basically a drug kingpin. Like, it's pretty much everybody in the county knows. Allegedly. But yeah, pretty much everybody knows about that. It's a well-known secret, some people would say.
As far as stats on exploitation that could be provided to journalists, I feel like journalists are pretty well aware of what's going on. Like, all the numbers I cited today came from AL.com and AP News. So I feel like journalists are on top of it. If you're looking for more specific stats, I don't know how I would collect that information. Like, they would be better at collecting it than I would be.
Yeah, we're amateurs over here, y'all. Remember that. Cut us some slack.
Well, no, it's all good.
Oh, that's Morgan. That's one of our co-hosts, actually. Hopefully they'll be joining us soon. They just got back to Alabama and, recovering from the holidays themselves.
So, but it would be worth taking those articles from AL.com. If you can spell her last name, Ivana Hrenque, and read her articles that she's been publishing about the parole system, and also the most recent one about the parole rate more than doubling. It would be worth, saying, when you write to your legislator saying, hey, I read this article. I'm very concerned about this. Look at these numbers. This is abysmal.
Oh, More Perfect Union also has a video on prison labor in Alabama.
Yeah, and
it's really good.
We also dropped a video by Vice in the show notes. You can check out the story of Mr. Goins, who has gone through the parole process and won't be hearing. He got denied and won't be hearing for another one till I believe 2026 before he gets another chance. And this is Miss Ivana. If you go to al.com/denied, she's been watching these stories for over a year now. So you can check out her reporting. Shout out to her for real for keeping her eye on this and having some grit about her. So yeah.
I think that's great because there should be more transparency as far as why they're being denied parole. Why is it taking so long for them to get parole, etc.?
I think the parole issue, it really is low-hanging fruit where we can rack up an easy win.
Yeah,
we can
definitely.
get that number up. Now, we may not be able to stop the work problem overnight, or get the state to give them their 40% of their paycheck back. But the parole numbers, I feel good about that being a reachable goal.
Yeah.
Definitely agree.
Yeah. We keep nudging the ball forward, y'all. All this stuff is going to take time. You need to think not in minutes, hours, or days, but in years, and understand that there were folks that came before us in a lot harder positions. There's incarcerated folks that are out there organizing themselves within the system. Use your privilege, your position that you're in, to volunteer, join DSA, get in touch with victim or with prisoner advocacy groups like the Equal Justice Initiative and Miss Cobb's nonprofit. But there's plenty. Call your congressman, call your state senator, your house senator, or your house senator. Call your house representative, and get some things done, because your voice matters. And the more you keep yakking, the more of us that keep yakking, the more it works. Bullying works, y'all. It really does. So get out there and bully them. So, Jason, you got any other thing you'd like to put out there?
I don't think that I do.
We appreciate you. Congratulations. Go ahead.
The Huntsville Bail Fund also works to keep people out of prison too, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
Local organization.
Yeah, we spoke to them last week. So yeah, definitely support your local bail fund. I think the Huntsville Bail Fund is the only bail fund in the state that's active.
Yep.
So definitely pitch into them if you get a chance.
So yeah, if you want to start a bail fund, get in touch with us. We'll point you in the right direction. There's a lot that can be done, and if you don't think you can do it, you're wrong. You can. There's plenty of people out there that have been in tougher spots and have fought the good fight. Mars, you got anything else you want to put out there?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, hey, folks, I know we're supposed to say this at the beginning, I think. Like and subscribe and share and all that good stuff. But, this has been Cornbread and Roses with Austin and Jason and Mars. All the power to all the people, and we shall break our chains together. Solidarity forever, y'all.
Solidarity forever.
Solidarity forever.